Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are tackling a document that keeps project managers awake at night and, well, it keeps construction lawyers very, very busy. We are opening up the Silver Book.
The NEIC Silver Book, specifically the 2017 edition. Yeah, it's pretty much the gold standard, or I suppose the silver standard, for EPC and turnkey projects globally.
EPC, so engineering, procurement, and construction, also known as the "here are the keys, call me when it works" model.
Exactly. And because it's a turnkey contract, the whole philosophy is very, very specific. The contractor takes on almost all the risk. And I mean, nowhere is that more obvious and frankly more intense than in Clause 5 design.
And that is our mission today. We are going to decode Clause 5, because when I first looked at this, I thought, okay, design. Simple, an architect draws a picture, the builder builds it. But in the Silver Book, it is. It's infinitely more complicated.
Yeah, it's about total risk.
So about the source material we're working from, just to be clear.
The conditions of contract for EPC turnkey projects. And we were really just focusing on the general conditions for design. And, you know, right off the bat, there's a reality here that usually shocks people who aren't deep in this world.
Okay, what's the shocker?
Well, in a traditional contract, let's say like the FIDIC Red Book, the client, the employer, tells you what to build. They give you the drawings, you execute. If their measurements are wrong, that's their problem.
Right, you get paid to fix it. That just seems logical. If I bake a cake using your recipe and it tastes terrible, that's kind of on you.
Exactly. But in the Silver Book, specifically Clause 5.1, that logic just goes out the window. The contractor is responsible for the design of the works and for the accuracy of the employer's own requirements.
Wait, let's unpack that. So if the employer comes to me and says, build me a bridge, here are the calculations for the load bearing, and those calculations are wrong, that's my fault. As the builder.
Yes. Under Clause 5.1, absolutely. The text explicitly says the contractor shall be deemed to have scrutinized, prior to the base date, the employer's requirements. That includes all their design criteria and their calculation.
Deemed to have scrutinized. That is some heavy legal phrasing. That sounds like a trap.
It's the cornerstone of the Silver Book's risk allocation. It means you can't come back 6 months later and say, well, hey, I just built what you told me to build. No, you're the expert. You are the turnkey contractor. If their math is wrong, you were supposed to find it.
So the minute you sign that contract, you effectively own their mistakes, unless you flag them before signing.
Precisely. The clause states, the contractor shall be responsible for the accuracy of such employer's requirements. It just fundamentally shifts the whole dynamic of bidding. It forces you to be incredibly diligent before you even submit a price.
It sounds like you need a whole team of engineers just to read the tender documents. You have to basically design the project before you even win it, just to make sure you're not buying a lemon.
That is exactly right.
Yeah.
And that's why bid costs for these projects are so high. You're not just pricing concrete and steel. You're pricing risk. You're ensuring the project's feasibility, really.
Speaking of engineers, the text is actually specific about who's allowed to do this design work, right? It's not like the foreman can just sketch it on a napkin.
No, absolutely not. The clause is very clear. There are 3 criteria. First, they have to be engineers or other professionals who are qualified and competent in that specific discipline.
Makes sense. A structural engineer for the structure.
Second, they have to comply with any criteria that are already in the employer's requirements. But the third one, and this is the legal kicker, they must be qualified and entitled under applicable laws to design the works.
Entitled under applicable laws. So they have to be licensed in the country where the project is actually being built.
Correct. And this is a huge hurdle for international contractors. You know, you could be a massive German engineering firm that wins a contract in, say, Vietnam. You have brilliant engineers in Munich. But can they legally stamp and sign drawings for a bridge in Da Nang?
Probably not without a local license or a local partner.
Exactly. So the contract forces you to either have local qualified staff or partner with a local firm that can carry that liability. You can't just fly your home team in.
Okay, so the contractor is on the hook for everything. The employer's bad math, local licensing. Is there any safety net at all? Is there anything in the employer's requirements that the contractor isn't liable for? Because this sounds like a suicide mission.
There is a safe harbor, but it's very narrow. The clause lists 4 specific exceptions where the employer does retain the responsibility.
Okay, what are they? What gets me off the hook?
First, anything that's stated in the contract as being immutable or specifically the employer's responsibility. So if they say, do not touch this data, you must use it as is, you're not liable for it.
Okay, that's one. So if they mandate a specific turbine from a specific brand and that turbine fails...
That's on them, assuming you installed it correctly.
Got it. What's number 2?
Second, the definitions of the intended purpose of the works. If the employer says, I want a factory that makes cars, and you build one that makes cars, they can't later blame you if what they really needed was a factory that makes boats.
Right. You build what they ask for, not what they should have asked for.
Exactly. Third is criteria for testing and performance. They set the bar for the test. So if they say the water must be 99% pure and you hit 99%, they can't move the goalpost later and say they actually needed 99.9%.
And the last one?
This is the most logical one, but also the one that gets argued about the most. Data and information, which strictly cannot be verified by the contractor.
You mean like subsurface geological data that would take a year to drill and verify?
That's a perfect example.
Yep.
Or maybe 50 years of private flood records for a specific site that only the employer has. The logic is, if a competent contractor couldn't possibly have checked it during the tender period, it's unfair to hold them liable.
But I'm guessing there's a catch.
Always. The clause ends by saying, except as stated in this subclause. So if it's not one of those 4 things, the risk is yours. The default position is always the contractor pays.
So we've scrutinized the requirements, accepted the risk, hired local engineers. Now we actually have to design the thing, which brings us to the paperwork. I swear, construction feels like it's 20% concrete and 80% PDFs.
That's not an exaggeration here. We're now in subclause 5.2, contractor's documents. And this governs the whole review process.
And it's not just, here are the blueprints. This is a really strict review cycle, isn't it?
It's a very strict loop. Subclause 5.2.2 defines it. The contractor submits a document, but they also have to submit a contractor's notice. And this notice basically says, okay, this document is ready, it complies with the contract, and if it doesn't, here's exactly where it deviates.
You have to call yourself out if it doesn't comply.
You do. You can't just sneak a design change past them. And once the employer gets that notice, the clock starts ticking. This is the famous review period.
Which is usually 21 days.
Right, unless stated otherwise. And in those 21 days, the employer can give a notice of no objection, which is the goal.
A notice of no objection. It's such careful language, not approved. Just, we don't object to this.
The phrasing is very deliberate. It avoids the word approved, so the employer doesn't take on any ownership of the design. It's passive. It just means you can proceed. Or they can object. But here's where it gets really interesting. What happens if the employer just does nothing?
They ghost you. You send the drawings and just hear crickets.
In a lot of contracts, that would leave you in limbo, with a crane sitting idle. But the Silver Book has what you could call a silence is golden rule.
Yeah.
Subclause 5.2.2 says if the employer gives no notice within that review period, they are deemed to have given a notice of no objection.
I love that. So if the client's project manager goes on vacation and forgets to check his email, the design is automatically cleared to go.
Effectively, yes. It's a critical mechanism to keep the project moving. Time is money, and the employer can't stall the project just by being disorganized. If they snooze, the contractor can proceed.
That puts a ton of pressure on the employer's team. But what if they do object? They send it back covered in red ink. What happens then?
Then you are in the penalty box. You have to revise it and resubmit, and the wording here is brutal. You do not get an extension of time for this delay.
Ouch. So the project deadline doesn't move just because your design wasn't up to scratch?
Correct. It's your fault, you eat the time. And it gets worse. If the employer incurs extra costs because they have to review your bad design 2 or 3 times, maybe they're paying an external consultant by the hour to check it, the employer can claim those costs back from the contractor.
So you're burning time you don't have, and you're literally paying the client's team to review your own mistakes. That is a vicious cycle.
That is the discipline of the Silver Book.
Yeah.
Get it right the first time.
Okay, so we've got this review loop, but can I start building while something is being reviewed? Like if the foundation drawings are approved, but the roof is still being designed, can I pour concrete?
Only for the part that's approved. Subclause 5.2.3 is crystal clear. Construction of such part shall not commence until a notice of no objection is given.
No jumping the gun.
None. If you pour concrete before you get that notice, you are in breach of contract. And if you want to change the design later, say, you find a better way to route some pipes, you have to stop work on that section.
Stop the whole project.
No, just that part. You notify the employer, you submit the new design, and that 21-day clock starts all over again for that specific element.
Wow, that sounds like a scheduling nightmare. You really have to commit to your design. But
Okay.
okay, I want to talk about what you mentioned earlier, this contradiction. We talked about the notice of no objection, the we don't hate it stamp.
Right. So let's say you submit your design for a massive retaining wall. The employer reviews it. They give you that notice of no objection. You build it perfectly. 6 months later, it collapses because of a flaw in the design calculations. Who is liable?
Well, common sense would say the employer looked at it. They had 21 days. They had no objection. Surely they have to share some of the blame.
You'd think so. But then you look at subclause 5.8, which is titled Design Error.
Oh no, I have a bad feeling about this.
It explicitly says that even if a document got a notice of no objection, if an error is found later, the contractor must correct it at their own risk and cost.
That is the ultimate gotcha clause.
It is the turnkey reality check. The employer's review is for their benefit and comfort only. It is not a quality control process that relieves the contractor of any liability, ever.
That's just wild. So the employer can look at it and say, looks good to me, and then when it fails, just turn around and say, well, you're the expert. You shouldn't have submitted a bad design.
That is exactly the logic. The text says their review does not absolve the contractor. You are the EPC contractor. You own the design. Period. End of story.
It makes that whole review process feel like a one-way safety net. It only protects the employer.
It does. It forces the contractor to be completely self-reliant. You cannot treat the employer's review team as your safety net. You are on your own.
So you've got the design, the liability, the 21-day clocks. What about just the rules of the road, the laws of the country?
Right. Subclause 5.3 and 5.4 cover that. The design has to comply with the laws of the country.
Seems straightforward. Follow the building code.
It is, but projects take years. What happens if the government changes the fire safety standards halfway through construction?
That's a great question. If I design the fire exits based on 2024 laws, and in 2026 the government says all exits now have to be wider, am I on the hook to rip out the walls I just built?
This is where the base date becomes critical again. Subclause 5.4 says the standards that apply are the ones that were enforced at the base date.
And the base date is that line in the sand, usually 28 days before you submit your tender.
Exactly. It freezes the rules at that moment in time.
Yeah.
So if the laws change after that base date, the contractor isn't automatically liable for the cost of the change.
So if a new law passes requiring, I don't know, gold-plated door handles, I don't just have to buy them.
No. The clause says you notify the employer. And if they agree that compliance is needed, it becomes a variation.
A variation, the magic word. That means the contractor gets paid extra for the change.
It does. It triggers Clause 13. This is one of the very few areas in Clause 5 where the risk is actually pushed back to the employer.
That is a relief. Some protection against regulatory chaos, at least.
True. But let's fast forward. The plant is built. The design was solid. We're ready to leave. But Clause 5 still isn't done with us.
Right, the finish line. You can't just toss the keys over your shoulder and walk away. There are final deliverables.
Exactly. Subclauses 5.5, 5.6, and 5.7, training, as-built records, and O&M manuals.
Let's talk about training, Clause 5.5. This is always interesting. It's not enough to build the machine. You have to teach them how to use it.
And this is not a casual thing. The text says the works are not considered completed for the purpose of taking over until the specified training is done.
That's a huge deal. So every light could be on, every machine humming, but if you haven't held the training seminar, you can't get that taking over certificate.
Correct. You are effectively trapped on site. And think of the leverage that gives the employer. If they're not happy with the training, they can hold up the entire handover.
And then there's as-built records, Clause 5.6. Now, for anyone listening who isn't in construction, these are different from the design drawings, aren't they?
Oh, very different. Design drawings are the theory. As-built are the reality.
Yeah.
During construction, things move. A pipe shifts 6 inches to avoid a beam. The as-built records have to show the exact final locations of everything.
And why is that so critical?
Because 5 years from now, the maintenance team needs to know where the valve actually is, not where it was supposed to be. And the clause says you need to submit these before you can even start the tests on completion.
Right. You can't test it if you don't have the map of how it was actually built.
Then finally, the manuals. Clause 5.7, the O&M manuals.
This sounds like the boring part.
But it's where a lot of contractors get tripped up. There's a 2-step process. You need provisional manuals before you start testing.
Provisional, like a draft version.
Basically, yeah. So the employer's team has instructions to help run the tests. But then, before the final taking over, you have to submit the final manuals.
And what kind of detail are we talking about?
The text is incredibly demanding. It says they had to be detailed enough for the employer to operate, maintain, dismantle, reassemble, adjust, and repair the entire plant.
Dismantle and reassemble. You're basically writing the IKEA manual for a billion-dollar power plant.
Including an inventory of all the spare parts. It's a monumental task. And remember that zombie liability clause? 5.8.
The one that says you're always responsible.
It applies to the manuals, too. If there's a typo in the manual that causes an operator to damage equipment during testing, the contractor fixes the equipment and the manual, all at your own cost.
It is a complete, all-encompassing package. Design it, build it, document it, train on it, and guarantee all of it.
That is the essence of the Silver Book.
So let's zoom out. We've walked through Clause 5. The big takeaway for me is that the contractor is just walking a tightrope with no net.
It's a masterclass in risk transfer. Our mission was to decode the responsibilities, and the conclusion is clear. The contractor isn't just a builder. They are the ultimate insurer of the design.
That phrase, deemed to have scrutinized, is going to stick with me. It's the legal version of buyer beware, but aimed at the seller.
It should. If you're listening and you work for a contractor, your pre-bid engineering team is the most important team you have. If they miss something, it comes directly out of your profit.
And if you're an employer,
you're relying on this contract to shield you from design complexity. But you also have to manage your side of it, like that 21-day review, so you don't accidentally approve things by just staying silent.
It's a high-stakes game of ping-pong with PDF files.
But here's the provocative thought I want to leave you with. We talked about that paradox. Under 5.2.2, if the employer stays silent for 21 days, the design is deemed approved.
Right. Silence means yes.
But then under 5.8, the employer isn't liable for any errors in that approved design anyway.
Right. The contractor still owns all the risk.
So, does the employer actually have any real incentive to review the documents carefully? Or are they, from a purely legal standpoint, better off just staying silent?
That is a twisted question.
Think about it. If they review it and make comments, they might accidentally direct the contractor towards a problem, maybe opening the door for a claim. They put their fingerprints on the design.
Yeah.
But if they stay silent, the design gets approved, the project moves on, and the contractor keeps 100% of the liability.
So by doing their job and reviewing the work, the employer might actually be weakening their legal position.
It creates a perverse incentive. Sometimes, under the strict logic of the Silver Book, the safest strategy for the client is to do nothing.
That is diabolical, and it explains a lot.
It's the Silver Book. It's not about being fair. It's about being certain.
Well, on that slightly terrifying note, we'll wrap up. Whether you're drafting the designs or reviewing them, or maybe pretending not to review them, read Clause 5 very, very carefully. Thanks for diving in with us.
Always a pleasure. And read the fine print.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.
If you're interested in the templates, please visit our shop. The link is in the description.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and see next time.